Okay, Torah portion's called Yitro, or for some reason it's been transliterated into English as Jethro. Not really what you translate Yitro into English as. Got that? Oh. Okay.
Just somebody pointing to it.
Okay. Right, yeah. Yitro is the name that I'm going to use. Taking Jethro out because Jethro sounds like some cider drinking pig farmer from the West Country. Not really where it's coming from. Don't know what this is doing. Okay. Right, where we find ourselves now is camped at the base of Mount Sinai. And the Israelites will spend the rest of the book of Exodus, all of the book of Leviticus, and the first 10 chapters of the book of Numbers encamped at the foot of Mount Sinai. So this is really important, the location that they're in at the moment. What will happen during the 11 months or so that the Israelites encamp here will not only redefine who they and we are, so remember all of this applies to us, as individuals and as a collective entity, it will literally and figuratively shake the world. And I've got a picture here of the top of Mount Sinai. You see where it's all black there? That's where it's all charred. You see, this is the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. They've actually found the spot where the real Mount Sinai would have been. And they found the altar to the golden calf at the base of it and all sorts of stuff. It's under military protection at the moment. So this is the real site. The site that they say is the official Mount Sinai isn't Mount Sinai. This is where God came down in flames and in a thick cloud and spoke to the Israelites. Okay, so we'll go through a little bit of a breakdown of their journey so far after leaving Egypt. They ate their first meal of freedom at Sukkot. Remember, this is the first food that they'd actually eaten free of the bondage of slavery in Egypt. They would have grown up their entire lives in slavery. So this is the first thing that they ate in freedom. Exodus 12:37-39 says, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 on foot that were men beside children. And remember, the male children had been killed for 80 years. So for there to be 600,000 men, there's probably about 2 or 3 million people in total. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, for they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry, neither they prepared for themselves any victual. This is what we remember in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's why we eat unleavened bread, because they left Egypt in a hurry, didn't have any time to let the yeast rise in the loaves. They stood at the crossroads of Etham, and there Jehovah made the decision to lead them by the way of the wilderness instead of the way of the Philistines. Exodus 13:17 says, and it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near, for God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. Okay, they faced the charge of Pharaoh's mighty army at Pi-hahiroth, and there they experienced the miracle of the Red Sea. Exodus 14:9 says, but the Egyptians pursued after them all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth before Baal-zephon. Okay, verse 21 says, and Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and Jehovah caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Verse 27 says, and Moshe stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and Jehovah overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. They then followed the pillar on a 3-day hike into the wilderness of Shur to the encampment of Marah. There Jehovah turned bitter waters sweet for them. Exodus 15:22-25 says, so Moshe brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. And the people murmured against Moshe, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried unto Jehovah, and Jehovah showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them. I think that's an interesting picture as well, because the tree is always a picture of Israel, and the waters are always a picture of the nations and the multitudes of people. And it's when the tree is in the midst of all of the nations, the tree, Israel, makes all of the nations sweet. And it's a picture of in the millennium, when Israel is under the rule of Yeshua, all of the nations are kind of brought into alignment with God's ways by Israel's presence in the midst. Then at Elim, they experienced the abundance of Jehovah's provision and rested up. Exodus 15:27 says, And they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. Then came Rephidim, where they received manna from the sky, living water from a rock, and then fought and won a battle with Amalek. Exodus 17:8-11 says, Then came Amalek and fought with Israel and Rephidim. And Moshe said unto Joshua, Choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moshe had said unto him, and fought with Amalek. And Moshe, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moshe held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. So that's where we are now. It's kind of the soundbite version. Today's Parsha, a stranger is going to come to call. It's Moshe's father-in-law, Yitro. We'll see who Yitro is in our lives. We are, of course, not specifically told by Torah whether Yitro came to Sinai as a friend or as a foe. Okay? What do you think Yitro was? People who've been through the Torah, what would you say? Friend or foe? Okay. Now, we've lived for several centuries now in a post-Enlightenment era in which human reason and logic is held in far, far higher esteem than Jehovah's ways and will. Okay? So Yitro comes along and he's got a suggestion of how things should be done, how Moshe should organise the camp. But this is according to human reason. I'm not saying he's not Moshe's friend, I'm not saying that he's his enemy. What I'm saying is that he isn't doing things by Jehovah's ways. So since post-Enlightenment, man has tended to view all of life, including spirituality, through this humanistic lens. For generations, men have hailed Yitro as a wise man, a thinking man, and necessarily a friend of the fledgling young nation of Israel. So the sages would say that Yitro was the first righteous convert. Okay, this is how they view what Yitro did. But is it really as we've been taught? Is it really what the sages say? Is it possible that the whole Yitro visitation episode at Sinai is designed by Jehovah to serve as a test or a trial? Now this, Yitro was a priest of Midian. This is the historical record of the Midianites that's set out in the Tanakh. Torah tells us that it was the Midianites who brokered the sale of Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Torah tells us it's going to be the Midianites who will, at Baal Peor, use their women to entice the Israelites to turn from Jehovah to take up idolatry. And it's also the Midianites who will harass and oppress Israel in the days of Gideon. Okay, so they haven't got a good track record. It's not to say that Yitro is a bad person because he's associated with them, but the times that we see them in Scripture, it's not good things don't happen. They haven't got the Israelites' best interests at heart. Scriptural characteristics of the Midianites: they distract us from what Yahweh is doing, they entice us into attitudes and practices that will weaken us, use our own physical desires and appetites against us to render us powerless to fulfill Yahweh's divine purposes for us. Okay, so this is what they do. Every time they show up, one way or another, this is what they do. So while we do not want to judge Yitro prematurely based solely upon his lineage, according to the historical record, we certainly do have every reason in the world to be on our guard in his presence. we will have to learn as well that each and every voice we hear is not the voice of Yehovah or Yitro. He's a certain type of person in our life. He's the person who comes from a secular culture, who's saying things that seem to make sense. It seems to make sense according to worldly wisdom, but it's not the way Yehovah has directed us. But each and every voice of a stranger, however pleasing or rational it may sound, is for us neither good nor the source of anything good. It's certainly not very good. We will Shema Asar, will we Shema Asar and Shema what Yehovah instructs us? Will we trust and obey? Will we keep what Yehovah instructs us? Or will we instead listen to and follow the voice of a stranger? And this is something that's particularly relevant in the walk of a new believer. Somebody from your past, say, will come along and they'll start talking to you in the ways of the world, and it'll seem like that makes sense. It'll seem like that's the way to go. It'll seem to make sense according to human reason, but it's not what Yehovah directs you to do. You need to hear and obey, do and keep the things that he says. So if someone comes along and they're suggesting something that's not in line with Yehovah's word, it's not right for us. Our dealings with a smiling, charismatic stranger from our prior way of life, pagan way of life, secular way of life, constitutes a great opportunity to find out exactly how we're going to deal with this. Yehovah has given us 3 instructions as to how we are to approach, navigate through and overcome all life circumstances. Everything that life throws at us, 3 simple things that we're to do. To Shema his voice and his voice alone, to Asar that which he proclaims as righteousness, and to Shema all his instructions and directions. So to trust and obey his voice and his alone, to do that which he proclaims as righteousness, and to keep all his instructions and directions. Exodus 18 starts, it says, when Yitro, the priest of Midian, Moshe's father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moshe and for Israel and his people, and that Yehovah had brought Israel out of Egypt, then Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moshe's wife, and after he had sent her back, and her 2 sons, of which the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been an alien in a strange land. I think this is an interesting name, because Gershom becomes one of the tribes of the Levites. His descendants become the Levites, and his name means I have been an alien in a strange land. Psalm 19, 18 to 19 says, open thou mine eyes that I may behold wondrous things out of thy Torah. I am a stranger in the earth, hide not thy commandments from thee. This is the attitude of somebody. If you feel like you're a stranger in the world, if you feel like you're an alien in the world, it's probably because you're one of Yehovah's people. And this is what you're looking for. You're looking for his instructions, his way of life, because you look at the world around you and you see that there's a problem with it. You might not know what the answer is, but it's his instructions on life, it's his way of seeing things, and that's what's going to resonate with you, and that's what's going to seem correct to you. 1 Peter 2:11 says, dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. So we know that the flesh is enmity against the law of God, doesn't submit to the law of God. So that's the flesh, the opposite of the law of God. Walking by the Spirit is walking by his Torah, walking by his instructions. So the people who are strangers, pilgrims in the world, who are aliens in the world, they're not to go by fleshly lusts. They won't find satisfaction in that. The thing that they'll find satisfaction in is Yehovah's Torah. Verse 4 says, and the name of the other was Eleazar, who becomes the high priest after Aaron. For the God of my father said, he was mine help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moshe into the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moshe, I thy father-in-law, Yitro, am come unto thee, and thy wife, and her 2 sons with her. And Moshe went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance, and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent. So he's gone, this guy that's raised him for 40 years, this priest of Midian, and he's gone out and he's welcomed him. Moshe told his father-in-law that all that Jehovah had done unto Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how Jehovah delivered them. And Yitro rejoiced for all the goodness which Jehovah had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. So, it sounds good. He's rejoicing over this, and Yitro said, Blessed be Jehovah, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of the Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Jehovah is great, is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. And Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel, to eat bread with Moshe's father-in-law before God. So it sounds good. He's rejoicing over what Jehovah's done. He's saying he's greater than all these other gods, and he's offering burnt offerings and sacrifices to Jehovah. Let's examine that a little bit more closely. This is what he said. Note that he does not acknowledge Jehovah as the only God, or even the one true God. Instead, he refers to him simply as the greatest of all the deities. So he's not saying he's the only deity, he's saying, he's the hardest of all the deities, basically. Note that he attributes to other gods the intellectual capacity and will to devise plots. He says, for in the thing which they dealt proudly, he rose above them. Exactly what dealings is he attributing to other deities, to deities other than Jehovah? He's saying that these other deities all have power, they all have influence in the world. Just by saying that, they've dealt proudly, Jehovah's exalted himself above them. He's saying that these guys have power too. He then builds an altar and slaughters animals and presents animal sacrifices on it. Sounds like a good thing to do. He starts with what the text calls an olah, an ascending offering or an elevation offering, and then he proceeds to slaughter something the text calls simply zabachim, literally meaning multiple unidentified slaughterings. Okay, when you read it like that, it's probably not sounding quite so good. From whom do you think that Yitro, the pagan priest of Midian, learned how to make animal sacrifices? Did he learn it from Jehovah, or was it something he picked up from his paganism? The answer is clear. Jehovah's directions concerning altar practice will always place strict limits on the amount of blood shed, and will always clearly define the purposes for it. Something that's not done in just slaughtering multiple animals. Jehovah will make the shedding of blood point always to the slaying of his Messiah. It's always a picture of Yeshua's death. What Yitro did was not a picture of Yeshua's death. Yitro shed the blood of multiple innocents in our ancestors' camp and thereby polluted it. And the blood of these innocents will, like the blood of Cain, be received by the land, where it will cry out to Jehovah for vengeance. So what he's actually done is he's come into the camp of the Israelites and he's made an abomination before Jehovah. He's done a pagan sacrifice before him. Okay. Yitro is temporarily buddied up to Moshe. He has said what Moshe wanted to hear. He has even used a couple of the magic buzzwords of Moshe's developing walk with Jehovah. And you'll find that this happens in our walk as well. People will come in and they'll use the right words, they'll start talking about God, but it won't be the right God, it won't be Jehovah. If we step back and take an objective look at the situation, we would have to acknowledge that Yitro is, despite his rejoicing on behalf of this vast army of people, he's still a pagan. He's still following pagan practices. He's not a righteous convert. He hasn't converted to Jehovah at all. He's just doing his pagan practices, making it out like he's doing it for Jehovah. Verse 13 says, And it came to pass on the morrow that Moshe sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moshe from the morning unto the evening. And when Moshe's father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning unto evening? And we'll have people like this in our lives as well. They'll see what we're doing for Jehovah, and they'll go, what are you doing? What's all this about? Don't understand. And Moshe said unto his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God, When they have a matter, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. That's interesting. He makes them know the statutes of God and his laws. This is before Sinai. This is before they were written down. Moses knows the laws of God somehow. So this shows us that the law of God wasn't just created at Sinai. It was an eternal thing. And because of Moshe's relationship with Jehovah, he knew the laws of God. And Moshe's father-in-law said unto him, that thing thou doest is not good. Now, this is how Jehovah has directed Moshe in this position. And Yitro's just come along and said, oh, no, this is no good. You don't want to be doing that. I will surely wear away both thou and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Okay, so this is Yitro's interpretation of what Jehovah has directed Moses to do. Yitro will talk of organisational structure, institutional practices, and form over substance priorities. All of these things sound good to a human perspective. Okay? Yitro's secular humanistic way will sound very good. Even Moshe will be convinced. He'll change the governance of Israel to be in line with Yitro's suggestions. But Yehovah will undo this, perhaps well-intentioned. Let's presume that it was well-intentioned on Yitro's part. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. It's well-intentioned set of instructions when he reorganises the people of Israel into tribes. So when he reorganises them into tribes, he takes this leadership system that's been instituted by humans, and he goes, no, it's no good. What we'll do is we'll give you the instructions, and then we'll put you into tribes, and we'll sort out this little bit of a mess. It's not too much of a problem, but this isn't the way that we want to do it. Note that at the time Yitro decided to throw in his 2 pennies worth, no one was complaining. People weren't complaining, Moshe wasn't complaining, and Jehovah was not complaining. I've encountered people like this, where they'll come to a situation where there's nothing wrong with the situation, and to exert some kind of influence, to exert some kind of control, some kind of power over the situation, what they'll do is they'll start criticising, and they'll start saying, well, actually, I've got a better way of doing it. Let's not do it the way that God has ordained that it is at the moment. Instead, listen to me. Don't listen to God, listen to me. The camp was unified, nothing was broken when Yitro tried to fix it. Yitro is, it appears, primarily concerned with what he perceives from his limited, worldly, humanistic perspective as Moshe's well-being. Okay? Perhaps since Moshe is his daughter's husband and his grandson's father, apostrophe there, apologise. Yitro reasoned that the busier Moshe is with Jehovah's business, the less attention Zipporah, Gershom and Eliezer would receive. So from his limited point of view, he just sees this as a problem. All of Moshe's time is taken up doing this. Wouldn't it be better if Moshe could come and be a family man, be a husband, and be a father to his children? This is surely better. Jehovah doesn't know what he's doing, directing them like this. He says, hearken now unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. What an arrogant statement. I'll give you counsel, and God will think it's great. It'll be like, wow, this is amazing. I've just been waiting for Yitro to come along with his amazing ideas. The way that I've been doing it so far, just rubbish. Well done, Yitro. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. But thou, for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. Now, note that Yitro does not in this discourse use the name of Jehovah. The name that he knows, he used it before when he blessed him. Instead, in each instance in which he refers to Jehovah, he uses the generic term Elohim. Okay, this is quite common in our culture as well. The word that we have for Elohim is God. Now, I think that God is fine. Elohim is used throughout the Bible. God is just a word that we have for Elohim, but it does present a problem when it's used by people who don't really know who God is. When we say God, we know that we're talking about the God of the Scriptures. When, say, someone in a Christian church says God, They're thinking of a God that took his people out of Egypt just to put them under the bondage of the law, and then he sent his prophets to die in order to tell them to return back to this bondage. And then he sent his son to die in order to change his mind and kind of say, oh, forget about all of that now, all of that law stuff that I kept telling people to go back to. That is the God that they've got in their mind. It's not the God of the scriptures. So when they say God, it's a different God. Elohim is an ambiguous designation which can, depending on the context and the identity of the speaker, be considered by the hearer or reader to be referring either to the God of creation or a pantheon of unnamed pagan deities. So when a pagan uses the term God, they're not talking about Jehovah. So the best way to refer to Jehovah is as Jehovah. We can refer to him as a title, as God, as Elohim. But it would be like someone coming to me and saying, Pastor, Pastor, instead of JP. I would much prefer that somebody used my name than a title. Not a problem if we use the term God, but it can cause problems. See here on the dollar bill it says, "In God we trust," cleverly in all capital letters, so that we don't know whether it's God capital G or God small g we trust. Okay, the God that the founding fathers of America served was not the God of the Bible. Quite a controversial statement, but they were Satanists. History bears this out. There's one nation under God. That's in the Pledge of Allegiance, which starts with, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America." Not "I pledge allegiance to God," "I pledge allegiance to Jehovah," "I pledge allegiance to a flag." So this can be a bit of a deceptive term. Verse 20 says, "And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And let them judge the people at all seasons, and it shall be that every great matter that they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee." So this sounds great to Moses. He thinks, spend all my time doing this. Instead of spending my time doing this, what I'll do instead is I'll just have them bring the most important things to me, and I will delegate responsibility to these people. It sounds like a very sensible thing to do. Yitro saw these people as objects of governance at best, and as obstacles to Moshe's enjoyment of life at worst. Yitro saw the people through flawed, self-interested human eyes. To him, these masses were nothing more than numbers, statistics, cattle to be herded into convenience stores. It was very humanistic, very secular way of thinking about things. It wasn't as Jehovah saw these people. Yitro was too blind to see what the Israelites needed most at this stage of their development was not a system of corporate governance, but an outpouring of revelation. See, Jehovah was just about to give them a load of revelation, tell them all about who he was, but instead, Yitro comes along, interjects into the situation and says, right, okay, what we actually need now is a system of governance that makes sense to us as human beings, not Jehovah's way. Hence Yitro's human ideas of government, like appointing judges over thousands, hundreds, 50s and 10s, was nowhere close to the plan according to which Jehovah intended to accomplish his objectives in relation to this people. Okay. The golden calf episode will demonstrate clearly that the leaders selected by Moshe upon Yitro's advice were, despite how capable and spiritual they appeared to be to Moshe on the outside, in fact, incapable, unworthy, and hopelessly out of tune with Jehovah, his will and his ways. So when Moshe goes up the mountain, people that he leaves in charge, that he's kind of said, right, I think that these people are the best, they allow the people to go after the sin of the golden calf. That is, of course, the problem with selection of leaders man's way, according to appearances and externals. Much better to allow Jehovah and just trust in him to select the leaders that he deems fit. John 10:12-13 tells us why. It says, "But he that is an hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, and the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep." So the person that man has appointed doesn't really care. The person that Jehovah will appoint does care, because Jehovah knows the thoughts and intents of their heart. Jehovah knows who to appoint, who is the shepherd, and who will just flee when the wolf comes. Okay? Deuteronomy 4 verse 2 says something important as well that we need to bear in mind, this, because this is Jehovah's heart. It says, "Ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of Jehovah your God, which I command you." Not the commandments or the directions of somebody that comes along that it seems to make sense. He's got his commandments which are perfect. He says, don't add to them, don't diminish from them, because these are perfect. Just keep them exactly as they are, because I'm God. I've given you a perfect set of commandments. Just trust in me. Deuteronomy 12:32 says something as well, very similar. "What thing soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it." And these two commandments, from these we see that Yeshua couldn't have come along and declared all food clean, and he couldn't have come and done away with certain laws, because if he had, he would have been a sinner. He would have been breaking these commandments. Okay, and as a sinner, he wouldn't have been eligible to be the Messiah. So if anybody is saying that Yeshua came along, did away with any of the commandments, or he added to the commandments, he made them more strict, or whatever people believe, if anyone's telling you that, the Messiah that they are proclaiming is a false Messiah. Okay, it's not the Messiah of the Scriptures. Proverbs 14:12 says, "There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, Yitro, but the end thereof are the ways of death." Now, Yitro is thought of the spiritual father of the Sanhedrin. Okay, that system of governance is traced back, given authority, because Moshe followed Yitro's advice. It's not done by tribes, it's just kind of human leaders over all of Israel. That's what the Sanhedrin did. And the most famous thing that the Sanhedrin did is they had a meeting where they decided that Yeshua was to be executed for the good of the people. So there's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death, the death of our Messiah. Mark 7:6-7 says, "He answered and said unto them, Well hath Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honoureth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men." This is Jehovah's heart when it comes to following the commandments of men, the doctrines of men, the things that men say are right over the things that he says is right. Matthew 15:14 says, "Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch." Okay? Yitro was a blind leader. Praise Jehovah that Moshe was not blind and they didn't fall into a ditch. Moshe was open to revelation from Jehovah, and Jehovah could kind of correct what Yitro had done here. Verse 24 says, "So Moshe hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law, and did all that he had said. And Moshe chose able men out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moshe, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moshe let his father-in-law depart, and went his way into his own land." Hi Yitro, thanks for all the help. Nice one. Now, let's have a cup of tea at this point. Let's have a break. We'll come back and do Exodus 19. Well, right, if we go back to Exodus 3:12, we see what Jehovah said was the purpose of them being here in the first place. It says, "When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain." So what is serving God? It's a bit of a vague phrase that's used there. A Hebrew word translated to serve is abad. It is a non-specific term meaning to interact with something or someone on a hands-on basis to bring about a state of fruitfulness. Some translate the Hebrew verb abad as meaning to work, but only in the sense that a baker works dough, or in the sense that a gardener works the ground. Okay, there's kind of a cooperative process that's happening there. The baker isn't creating something on his own, the dough's got to be there in order to be worked. This essence of abading is cooperative co-labouring. The idea is not to perform self-directed labour to make something happen, which one has dreamed up in his own mind, but is instead to involve oneself in a hands-on fashion in a process which the human in question did not in any wise begin, and for the fruit of which he cannot ultimately claim responsibility. So when you serve God, the things that you achieve, he starts the process of that work, and you can't claim responsibility for the fruit of that process because he started it and he brings it about to fruition. You're just part of the process, you follow his will. Genesis 2:5 shows an example of when this is used. It says, "And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for Jehovah God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground." The word till there is abad. There's not a man to work the ground. Genesis 2:15 says, "And Jehovah God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it." Okay, keep it is Shema, the same way that we keep the commandments, but to dress it, the word there is abad. He puts him in the garden to abad it, to work in this cooperative process with the garden. To abad the garden involves getting to know it and responding appropriately to its rhythm and ebb and flow. At different times the gardener had to abad his garden in different ways. Okay, so sometimes he abads the garden by directing excessive water away from some or all of its plants and trees, and at other times he abads by channeling appropriate quantities of water towards some or all plants and trees. Sometimes he abads by propagating or multiplying the plants in the garden. Other times he abads the garden by thinning and pruning so as to assure each plant or tree receives what is for the most beneficial amounts of sunlight. So he responds to the garden in his work of the garden. It's not a set process. It's as the garden determines, basically, so the gardener responds appropriately. In short, to abad means to know and understand the essence and potential of what you are abading and be prepared to co-labour with it as needed. Okay, so this is what serving God is. It's to respond to his prompts, bring about the fruit that he has envisioned in the first place. To abad Jehovah, which according to Exodus 3:12 is the purpose for which the Israelites have been called out of Egypt to Mount Sinai, thus means to get to know Jehovah, to come to understand his thoughts and his ways, and to trust in his processes, both of redemption and of judgment. Moshe was capable of doing that just fine without any help from Yitro, and so are you and I. We're perfectly capable of going about life according to Jehovah's will without other people interjecting. Exodus 19 starts and says, "In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. And Moshe went up unto God, and Jehovah called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine." So we've got a premise there on which this idea of being in covenant with Jehovah is based. If you will obey my voice, okay? It doesn't say if you decide that you want to be in covenant with me, but you don't do the things that I ask, it says, if you obey my voice. Now, this peculiar treasure here, the first thing that Jehovah indicates we will be to him is an am secular. Okay, that's what peculiar treasure is in Hebrew. Am means people or a nation. Secular is the feminine form of a Hebrew noun, which Strong's defines as meaning to shut up, i.e. to enclose or lock up, as one locks up a treasure in a secure place. That's what's implied by the Hebrew there. You're a treasured people to me. The Hebrew pictograph, the word secular, very interesting. The Hebrew letter samek means to protect, to enclose a flock, to protect them from predators. The letter gimel means to gather together as a group of animals gathering at the water hole to drink. The meaning of lamed is toward as in moving something in a different direction. The letter also means authority, as it is the sign of a shepherd's crook, the leader of the flock. It is associated with teaching. The Hebrew letter He is the pictograph of the window of a tent, the portal through which a tent dweller receives fresh air and perspective on the world around him. And so it is associated with revelation. The idea, the connotation of it is revelation. So the Hebraic mural formed by combining these pictographs in this order is to protect the gathered flock and move them in the desired direction towards and teaching them revelation. So this is who we are to Jehovah. We're a people that he protects, that he gathers, that he moves towards and teaches them about the revelation in his word. Verse 6 says, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, literally a priestly kingdom, and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So this was Jehovah's intention. Before the sin of the golden calf and the Levitical priesthood was instituted, we were to be a priestly kingdom to him. Now, Hebrews 7 is a passage that's commonly kind of misunderstood. This was the original intent of Jehovah. You see, Melchizedek in Genesis 14, he was a priest of Jehovah long before Mount Sinai, long before the Levitical priesthood. Verse 1 says, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to him also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being interpretation, king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. So people look at this passage and they say, well, he must have been immortal. Melchizedek was an immortal, like Yeshua was immortal. Melchizedek was immortal, he'd still be walking the earth today. Melchizedek was not immortal, he was a man, as it says in the next verse. Now consider how great this man was. Now, the thing that causes confusion here, where it says in verse 3, without descent, the better translation of that is without genealogy. So when it says without father and without mother, it doesn't literally mean he had no father and no mother. It means he had no genealogy. It's not written down, we don't know who this guy was. Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning or days nor end of life. It's not clear who he was. His genealogy isn't clear to us. Even the author of Hebrews didn't know who Melchizedek was. Verse 11 says, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called after the order of Aaron? So people look at this verse and they say, look, there's two priestly orders here, like an order of monks. Well, that's not what it means. When it says after the order of Melchizedek, it's not saying that there's a priestly order called the order of Melchizedek. It's saying in the same manner that Melchizedek was a priest. So it says, what further need was there that another priest should rise in the same manner that Melchizedek did, and not be called in the same manner that Aaron was called, according to lineage? For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law. So people will look at this verse and they'll say, there you go, right there it says that we're not under Torah anymore. When Yeshua came along, priesthood was changed and the system of law was changed. Well, it doesn't say that. It's like, if your case is being heard in the Crown Court, it can also be heard in the High Court. Now, that doesn't mean that the system of law has changed. It's still under the same system of law. It's just being held in a different court. It's being heard in a different court. It's under a different authority. So, Melchizedek was a priest in the Torah. Aaron, the Levitical priesthood, was a Torah-based priesthood as well. So both of these priesthoods are Torah-based. It's all under the authority of Torah. The only thing that's changed is the priesthood. People like to use Hebrews to say that the Torah has changed and now we're under the law of Christ or the law of love. But it's all Torah-based. Both priesthoods are both Torah-based. There's no change in Torah. It's just a change in the priesthood. Hebrews is only about the change in the priesthood. That's important to get. Verse 7 says, And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which Jehovah commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, All that Jehovah hath spoken we will do. And Moshe returned the words of the people unto Jehovah. And Jehovah said unto Moshe, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. And Moshe told the words of the people unto Jehovah. Now, it says that he comes in a thick cloud at this point. It seems that when Jehovah manifests, it is in a thick cloud. Now, things like the transfiguration happened in a cloud. He led them as a pillar of cloud by day. He appears here on the top of Sinai to give the commandments in a thick cloud. Okay. Now, water suspended in the air makes up clouds, and it's always present in three different forms. It's present as gas, as water vapor, as liquid within the cloud, droplets of water within the cloud, and solid water in the form of ice. That is how a cloud is composed. Now, this is an interesting picture. Jehovah also presents his word in three different forms to us. It's presented to us in spirit, as in incorporeal form, analogous to gas. See in Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. John 4:24 says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And then in John 1:1, we see in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So the Word appears in the form of spirit. It's also present in the Torah in liquid form. I might think that's a bit of a stretch. Not really sure that the Torah is the Word in liquid form. But anyone think of a verse that shows that the Torah is in fact in liquid form?
Washed in the waters of the Word.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You can have 10. Ephesians 5:26, that you might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. It's present in Messiah. It's present in solid form in Messiah. John 1:14 tells us, and the word became flesh, it became solid, and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So the word is present in these three forms, and that is the form which Jehovah most commonly manifests in our reality as. Verse 10 says, And Jehovah said unto Moshe, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day Jehovah will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that ye go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall surely be put to death. There shall not an hand touch it, for he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man. It shall not live. When the trumpet soundeth long, they shall come up to the mount. And Moshe went down from the mount unto the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes, which gives us a picture of washing our robes, washing the linen that we're given. as Charlie said, by the water of the word. Verse 15 says, and he said unto the people, be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. I think this is really, really interesting. Be ready against the third day. Now, we know that a day with Jehovah is as 1,000 years. Now, when Yeshua was crucified, we've had 2,000 years since then, and Scripture tells us that he will come back on the third day. Okay, so this is an image of this. Be ready against the third day, be prepared for this. Verse 16 pretty much describes the second coming of Yeshua. It says, and it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud from upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet trumpet sound comes on the Feast of Trumpets, exceeding loud, so that all people that was in the camp trembled. I don't think you could get a better picture of the second coming than that. On the third day. So this is giving us a prophetic picture of Yeshua's second coming. And Moshe brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mountain. Mount Sinai was altogether on the smoke, because Jehovah descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moshe spake, and God answered him by a voice. And Jehovah came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and Jehovah called Moshe up to the top of the mount, and Moshe went up. And Jehovah said unto Moshe, go down, charge the people lest they break through unto Jehovah to gaze, and many of them perish. Okay, so this is showing us that this is actually for the people's benefit, that he's saying don't let them come near, because if they come near out of their own curiosity, then they will die, like Nadab and Abihu, who entered into God's presence. They died. God saying don't let them do that, because it's for their own protection. And let the priests also, interesting, before the Levitical priesthood was set up, there were priests with them, which come near to Jehovah, sanctify themselves, lest Jehovah break forth upon them. And Moshe said unto Jehovah, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou chargedest us, saying, set bounds about the mount, and sanctify it. And Jehovah said unto him, get away, get thee down, and thou shalt come up, thou and Aaron with thee. But let not the priests and the people break through to come up unto Jehovah, lest he break forth upon them. So Moshe went down unto the people, and spake unto them. And God spake all these words, saying, I am Jehovah thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Okay, now there is debate, because this is the point at which God gives 10 commandments. Is this a commandment? I am Jehovah thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Okay, is that actually one of the 10 commandments? Because the traditional way of looking at it is, thou shalt have no other gods before me, is the first commandment, and then the next commandment is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in water underneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, Jehovah thy God, am jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generations of them that hate me. Now, there's two ways that you can look at that. Either you've got the first commandment, I am Jehovah thy God, and then the second commandment is, don't have any gods before me, don't have any images, don't bow down and worship them, all is the same command. Or you can judge it as, don't have any gods before me is one commandment, and then the next commandment is, don't have any images, don't have any graven images that you worship. Verse 6 says, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. There again we see the ones that he has mercy on are those that love him and keep his commandments, not just on those that say that they're in covenant with him, that represent his name. Brings us to verse 7. It says, thou shalt not take the name of Jehovah thy God in vain, for Jehovah will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. So if you take the name of Jehovah and you say that you're one of his people, and you misrepresent his name, you disgrace his name, and you've taken his name basically, for the purpose of having your own salvation and not for the purpose of glorifying his name within creation. You've taken his name in vain. Verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. A better rendering of this verse would be, you will remember and commemorate the Shabbat, for it is holiness. There's no word in there to suggest keep it holy. You can't take the Shabbat and make it not holy. You can't keep it holy. Better rendering is, for it is holiness itself. 6 days shalt thou labour and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Jehovah thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. Now this is quite a stipulation, because to the parents in the room, this is saying that you are actually breaking this commandment if you let your son or your daughter profane the Sabbath. Okay, the commandment actually contains that within it. So we have a responsibility to bring our children up according to Torah. For in 6 days Jehovah made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day, wherefore Jehovah blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Okay, we can't take another day and say this is the Sabbath day that we observe, because Jehovah has hallowed the seventh day. That's the only day that we can observe, is the Sabbath. Honour thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which Jehovah thy God giveth thee. Now I find this interesting, because it's saying your days will be long upon the land if you honour your father and your mother. It seems that Jehovah is making an extra promise there. He's saying, if you keep this commandment, then I'll give you long days upon the earth. Now these 10 commandments can be split up. As Yeshua said, there's 2 greatest commandments, where love Jehovah your God with all your heart, soul and strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. Now these commandments show you how to do these things. Now people will say that these commandments are split up, and they either show you how to love God or how to love your neighbour. But I would suggest that all of these commandments show you how to love God, because he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So by keeping all of these commandments, it's telling you how to love God. You could also say that by keeping all of these commandments, you're also loving your neighbour, because you're setting things in the order that Jehovah would have them in. So you're creating a beneficial situation. So all of the commandments tell us how to love God. All of the commandments tell us how to love our neighbour. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbour's. Okay, by doing that, you're saying Jehovah is giving this to this person and they're wrong. Basically, I want this thing, Jehovah is wrong. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moshe, Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moshe said unto the people, Fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. So he's saying, look, this is for your benefit. If he's putting on quite a show here. If you're afraid of him, that's a good thing, because you're going to keep his commandments if you're afraid of him. And the people stood afar off, and Moshe drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. Another second coming like thing. The book of Joel tells us that at the second coming it will be a day of great darkness. And Jehovah said unto Moshe, Thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, Ye have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Ye shall not make with me gods of silver, neither shall ye make unto you gods of gold. Quite a specific thing just to throw in there right before they have the golden calf incident. He's merciful. He tells them, don't be doing this. The very next thing that they do is they create a god of gold and they use it to serve Jehovah, and he just told them not to do it. And that's why he's so angry when they end up doing it. Now this whole thing, coming up onto Mount Sinai, it's seen as the wedding between Jehovah and Israel. Now, a Hebrew marriage requires certain documents. Now, it's commonly thought of that the commandments are the ketubah. Now, that's not necessarily true. The Yitro Eresin is more likely what they are, because a Hebrew marriage is in 2 parts. There's no kind of dating involved in the Hebrew marriage. What's involved is a betrothal to get married. Okay, so it's a promise to each other that you're going to get married, and then the marriage ceremony. The Yitro Eresin, the first document a prospective bridegroom is to prepare, is a Yitro Eresin. The document is the fundamental document of commitment. It is executed and delivered to the bride-to-be at the ceremony of betrothal. Now this is what this represents with them on Mount Sinai. This is the ceremony of betrothal unto Jehovah. They're not marrying him at this point. The second document is called the ketubah, founded upon the promises and stipulations of the Yitro Eresin. This document evidences the satisfaction of the bridegroom with his bride-to-be after the testing of the betrothal period. The ketubah constitutes a renewal and extension of the vows made initially at the time of Eresin, and is executed and delivered to the bride at the ceremony of full marriage. Okay, so what does the Yitro Eresin consist of? A covenant document given by the bridegroom to his prospective bride at the time of the Eresin ceremony contains 2 primary focuses, and you'll see that this is exactly what's happening here at Sinai. An outline of the specific terms of the bridegroom's proposal of marriage, and the description in specific terms of the bridegroom's expectations with regard to the bride and the marriage, i.e. a listing of general principles of what kind of husband he intends to be to her and what kind of wife he expects her to be to him. So when you're saying things like, I brought you out of Egypt on eagle's wings and stuff, it's language of a lover. The 10 Commandments are the beginning of this document being laid out, at the beginning of Jehovah saying what he expects of his bride. So if we are to say that we are the bride of the Messiah, then we have to follow his expectations, because after the betrothal period, they can turn around and say, well, no, you've broken your vows, your commitments here, so I'm not going to get married to you. Okay, this is what Jehovah says. He just says, please do this. All of this, thou shalt do this and thou shalt not, it's not in the Hebrew text. It's either a command to do something, or it's lo, and then the command to do it. In other words, don't do this. So he says one simple thing. He says, please commemorate the Sabbath's holiness and rest on it. It's the one thing that he asks us to do in the 10 Commandments, the one thing that he asks us to do. He asks us not to have any gods before me or worship any images. Don't disgrace my name. Don't kill each other. Don't commit adultery, spiritual or physical. Don't steal. Don't lie. And don't covet. Pretty simple. When you say, I really want that thing, when you're not leaving it down to Jehovah to distribute things to people, when you're saying, I really want that thing, I'm jealous of that thing. So it's pretty simple. Jehovah just lays down his expectations of us. That's what they are. The whole terminology of commandments and stuff, it makes it seem like it's something it's not. It's just Jehovah, our bridegroom, saying, this is what I expect of my bride. If you're going to be married to me, then this is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to behave. And that's what the entire Torah is. It's just his expectations of us, not kind of a harsh, legalistic system. It's just the best way for us to live. Okay, and next time we'll go through the other things that he wants of us, or some of the other things that he wants of us. Shall we pray?